After Super Nintendo games hit the Switch's online service, world peace was finally achieved throughout the world, for like 15 minutes or so. Unfortunately though, it didn't take very long before tensions between Uganda and Uzbekistan started flaring back up again. So in an attempt to achieving utopia for a few more minutes, all the world leaders gathered together with the intention of convincing Nintendo to add 64 games to the Switch's online service as well. Which certainly might work, but the problem is that there'd be a few issues with securing some of the 64's key titles, whether it be due to licensing issues making it more difficult with the Netflix model, games already being a part of compilations, or the fact that N-Dog probably doesn't want M-rated games on their service. I know their views on mature games have changed a lot since the 90s, but I really doubt they'd pair them alongside their family-friendly first-party games. The NES and Super Nintendo libraries have similar handicaps as well when it comes to the Switch's online service, but the Super Nintendo has too much gold to be denied, and, well, people were never really happy with the NES selection to begin with. And to be honest, I'm kinda worried that people are gonna have the same feelings towards the 64's library once they finally see it. But fear not, because even with these restrictions, there's still a possible combination of 20 games that calm Uzbekistan's candy asses down for at least another 5 minutes. What 64 games does Nintendo have access to that could do that? Well, fasten your seatbelts, leave your car running, go back to your computer, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, and allow me, the world's 34th greatest peacekeeper, CameronAllOneWord, to tell you the 20 best Nintendo 64 games to start with the Switch's online service. Number 1. Super Mario 64. Just because it's obvious doesn't mean it's not the right choice, because any 64 collection, compilation, or even discussion's impossible without this game. I mean, it's pretty much the game the 64 controller was designed for in the first place, and while 3D Mario has gotten way better since this came out, it still holds up pretty well even 42 years later, which is saying a lot for an early 3D video game. What more do you want me to say? It's friggin' Mario 64, bozo! Number 2. Super Smash Bros. This is another essential that fans are going to raise hell about if it's not included in the first wave of 64 games. It's kinda cool that the Switch lets you play 2-player NES and Super Nintendo games online, but there really aren't too many of them that people would play for more than like a few minutes. I mean, don't kid yourself, there's way better modern multiplayer games to choose from. However, despite the fact that the Smash series has come such a long way since the first game, I'd go as far as to say that this would be the most popular title on the service due to the online multiplayer capabilities alone. The lag's pretty atrocious for 2 players in an NES game, so I'd imagine it'd probably be unbearable for 4-player 64 games. So hopefully the 64 update comes alongside dedicated servers, even if it means we have to pay an ass hair more money. I made a video about how online tiers for the Switch would be a terrible idea, but it would only be a terrible idea if all we were paying for is more retro games. I don't think people would mind paying a little extra if it meant online play was actually going to be competent rather than being the same as it was when it was free, because let's face it, nobody's buying the service for retro games anyway. It's just kind of a nice bonus. All I know is that if Nintendo gets dedicated servers and lets people play the first Smash Bros. Game online, then it would probably be the most popular retro game on the Switch. Well, at least until Melee comes out anyway. Number 3. Mario Kart 69.
69.
Truth be told, I really don't give a monkey's nutsack about Mario Kart 64. I mean, it's alright, but it's certainly not the best in the series like so many casual gamers nostalgically believe. Playing the original Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo feels kinda weird, but at least it's different enough to where you'd think it's a different series if you changed all the characters. However, playing Mario Kart 64 just makes me wish I was playing any of the games that came after it. And seeing as how pretty much every Switch owner already has Mario Kart 8, it's kinda hard to imagine why anyone would play Mario Kart 64. A lot of people would say the same about Smash 64, but at least that game has the intrigue of being the first in the series. Despite my gripes though, Mario Kart 64 certainly wouldn't be the worst classic game Nintendo offers in their catalogs though. And as long as you're not comparing it to the rest of the series, it is still pretty fun and holds up well in its own right. At the end of the day, if the Nintendo 64's game library was an army, then Mario Kart 64 would pretty much be one of the old retired generals. So based on respect alone, you'd pretty much have to include it in the lineup for the authentic 64 experience. Number 4. Ocarina of Time. For over a decade, it was actually illegal in some countries to say anything bad about this game. But then when Brundtlefoss spoke out against this game, everybody took it as a chance to get away with saying things that used to be considered taboo. But I honestly think that a lot of people who duke all over Ocarina of Time are only doing so because future Zelda games improved upon the foundation. Which is in fact true, but I think this game holds up a lot better than people give it credit for. The Water Temple is kind of annoying, sure, but I was able to figure it out at 10 years old without a guide, so get a life, buttwagons. And yeah, Hyrule Field has a lot of nothing going on, sure, but it only takes like a minute to walk across the whole thing, and the song that's playing in the background's pretty boss. There are a few other flaws about the game, sure, but I really don't think any of them are enough to qualify it as unplayable or archaic or anything like that. The battles are fun, the puzzles make sense, there's no cryptic nonsense you have to look up on the internet, and on top of all that, it holds up amazingly well, even without nostalgia. So you know what, I think when it's inevitably dropped in front of people on the 64's online service, that people are gonna replay it and say, oh yeah, this game's pretty good. You might like other Zelda games more, but unlike a lot of other retro titles, Ocarina of Time on the 64 is hardly a chore to play to the end. I just hope the rumble feature works with the Stone of Agony in this version. Number 5. Majora's Mask. I stand by what I said in that Ocarina of Time definitely holds up better than people think, but again, future Zelda games definitely did a better job. However, there isn't any other game in any franchise quite like Majora's Mask. The world's doomed and you only have 3 days to save it, but thankfully, the Ocarina of Time can rewind time to the beginning of the first day. It's really unique, pretty dark for a Zelda game, and there's a lot of stories that take place within this 3-day cycle that are pretty interesting. So if you either skipped this game or just never got around to playing it, make sure you do when Nintendo delivers the goodies. Number 6. Starfox 64. There's really not a whole lot to say here since Starfox is pretty self-explanatory, but the key feature that'd make it way better with the Switch's online service is the fact that you can resume playing with save states. It only takes about 30 minutes to beat regardless of which paths you take anyway, but still. A lot of people only play retro games on the Switch in short bursts, so it's definitely a nice option to have so you won't have to keep starting the game all over again. It's a simple and fun game that's always going to hold up, and it was also probably the first game to have Rumble too. I mean, I couldn't find a game before that had Rumble in 3 minutes of Google searching, so there you go. I just hope Nintendo includes the Rumble in the Switch version is all. Number 7. Pokemon Snap 69.
69.
For some reason, Nintendo and Game Freak are absolute dinguses for not making a new Pokemon Snap on the Wii U despite the gamepad being perfect for it. But hey, they don't like money I guess, so that's fine. I'll just sit over here and cry about it, it's no big deal. They could still make a new game on the Switch with the gyro controls, but I guess we're getting Ring Game instead. Oh well, at least we could still play Pokemon Snap with the 64 collection, so that'll be cool I guess. I mean, it's missing a lot of key Pokemon, but then again, so are Sword and Shield, so I digress. Alright, in all seriousness, Pokemon Snap's a game from an era where developers were still trying to figure out how to make games in 3D. In today's day and age, though, something like this would probably be better suited for a digital download rather than a full retail game. And at the risk of getting some heat in the comments, it'd probably do alright as a mobile game, too. But even though it'd probably get old pretty quick for a 20 to 30 hour full retail game, Pokemon Snap on the 64 is still fun while it lasts, and it never overstays its welcome. And since nobody's subscribing to the online service for the retro games in the first place, then why not just toss it in the mix? If nothing else, it'll definitely be fun for an afternoon, and it'll absolutely tickle people's nostalgia holes. Number 8. Mario Party. I know Mario Parties 2 and 3 are better, and yes, the fact that I'm not lumping all 3 together means that I'm only including the first game. Why would I do that, you ask? Well, because I think it's a good thing to have something to look forward to in future updates. And besides, if they added all 3 games at once, then nobody would even bother with the first one. The Wii Virtual Console only included Mario Party 2, so you might think Nintendo should just cut the bullpiss and go with that one. However, one advantage to the Netflix model is that the games feel like a bonus rather than something you're supposed to buy. And don't get me wrong, I'd rather buy games, but if they're being given to you, then you might be willing to play some titles you might not have been willing to pay for. So who cares if Mario Party 1's not the best in the series, it'd still be fun to play just to appreciate the series' roots. And then once everybody got sick of it, Nintendo could just update the catalog. Little to no fuss, little to no muss. So even though it's probably one of the worst Mario Party games in the series, I say we give it one last time to shine. Number 9. Yoshi's Story. This is probably Yoshi's worst 2D platformer ever made. But you know what, in hindsight, this game isn't necessarily terrible. And with most 64 games usually not being as good to play in short bursts as the Super Nintendo or even the NES, I think we should embrace a few more games that are bite-sized. And besides, beating this game's easier than hooking up with my ex-wife Chili. And if you have kids in the household, then you probably want something that's easier for them to play, am I right? Eh? Eh? Oh, that's right, you can't respond to me in real time since this is a pre-recorded video. Oh well. Number 10. FZero X. A lot of 64 games got way better with feature releases, but since FZero's been a vegetable ever since the GameCube, we're probably gonna have to take what we can get. I don't know if Nintendo has any idea which retro games people are playing the most, but if they do, and if F-Zero gets a lot of playtime, then maybe Miyamoto-chan won't pull the plug on it after all. I'm sure Nintendo knows which retro games people are playing the most on the Switch, but even if they don't, F-Zero X is Uganda's favorite video game, so if Nintendo really wants that extra world peace, then they're gonna have to let us play it on the go with the Switch. Number 11. Wave Race 64. I don't care to play this game at all, but you know what? I don't want to play soccer on the NES either, and they still put that on the Switch. The purpose of putting Wave Race 64 on the first batch is because if it gets a bigger spotlight later on, then the YouTube trailer promoting it's probably gonna have a pretty bad day. And if nostalgia's the purpose of the retro libraries on the Switch, then you kinda need to let Wave Race join the gang too. And no matter how I look at it, this is really the only way they could do it without people getting pissed. I mean, imagine if you're trying to get your friend Lonnie into an exclusive nightclub. As we all know, Lonnie's an ugly loser who smells like bad beef, so even if he shows up with Mel Gibson, the bouncers are still gonna kick him out. However, if you put him in the middle of 19 Mel Gibsons, then people are gonna be way too starstruck and confused that there's so many Mel Gibsons to even care. Most people probably wouldn't play this game for more than like 10 minutes, but it's still way better than a lot of the games that ended up in the NES party, so who cares? Number 12. Kirby 64 and the Crystal Shards. The days of the 64 were from an era where platforming fans fell out of love with 2D and got engaged to 3D. However, when the priest asked if there were any objections during the wedding ceremony, Kirby 64 made a grand entrance which gave 2D platformers a nugget of hope. But then, after a lackluster performance, the wedding carried on, and we didn't see 2D platforming return until it got out of rehab many years later. Kirby 64 might not be the best game ever made or anything like that, but I do think people would appreciate it more in hindsight rather than just thinking of it as obsolete for being in 2.5 dimensions. All I know is that the best way to find out is to offer it in the 64's online service, because if you ask me, I think this game deserves a second chance. Number 13. Mario Tennis. Mario Tennis Aces might be better than Mario Tennis for the 64, but not as many people own it as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And if I'm being honest, Mario Tennis Aces isn't really worth buying on the Switch given how many other games there are. With that being said though, I think Mario Tennis would be a great 4-player game to dick around on with the Switch's online service. Number 14. Mario Golf. Pretty much everything I said about Mario Tennis could be repeated here, but the Switch doesn't even have an original Mario Golf game. I'm sure we'll probably get one at some point, but until we do, the 64 version would be a perfect game to play with your friends for a little while, until one person starts winning by too much and the other one just quits. Come to think of it, I don't think anybody's ever finished a full game of Mario Golf. If I'm wrong, then feel free to berate me in the comments, but unless I see proof, then I probably won't believe otherwise. Number 15. Paper Mario. As you might already know from a video I made before, I don't think the Thousand Year Door should be remastered just to see if fans want a classic Paper Mario game. Don't get me wrong, if they did remaster it, I would definitely play the hell out of it, but if you're gonna go through the trouble of making a new Paper Mario game, you might as well just make a completely new one in the classical style rather than just remaking an old one. Trust me, Nintendo knows damn well fans want a classic Paper Mario game, but even if they don't for some reason, then just put Paper Mario 64 on the Switch's online service and see how much it gets played. Either way, the first game in the series would be a perfect way to show newcomers what the series is all about if they are making a new Paper Mario game. And even if they decide to never make one again for whatever reason, then hey, this would still be pretty fun to play at least. Number 16. Sin and Punishment. This game wasn't originally released outside of Japan, but since we already got it on the Wii's Virtual Console, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be a problem on the Switch either. The average person probably didn't feel like paying $10 to pick this game up on the Wii, so seeing as how it would be a new game for most people, I think it's got a lot of potential to make a huge impact, at least outside of Japan anyway. But anyway, now it's time for the third-party games. Like I said, a lot of the best third-party 64 games would be kind of a hassle to get for the online service. Because on top of all the issues I already mentioned earlier, 64 emulation's kinda weird, even for Nintendo for some reason. Apparently the Wii didn't even have an emulator and had to alter each game individually to make sure it ran properly. I'm not 100% on whether or not this is even true, but it would explain why only 21 games were released on the Wii. Especially since only 2 of them were from third parties. Most developers probably didn't feel like dealing with it back then, and even though I'm sure they could do it easier now, they probably don't feel like dealing with it now either, especially with the Netflix model. With that being said though, number 17, Bomberman Hero. Remember when I said the Wii's Virtual Console only released 2 third-party 64 games? Well, this is half of them. Unlike Bomberman 64, Hero's more of a platformer cause, you know, that was kind of the craze at the time. But even though I don't think a series like Bomberman needed to become a platformer in the first place, I kinda think this was a pretty good attempt. And along with a few other games on this list, I really think this deserves a second chance as well. And besides, Uzbekistan's vice president of, poop likes it, so, you know, it at least stopped the fighting. Number 18. Ogre Battle 64. You know, that other third-party game that was on the Wii's Virtual Console. To be honest, I haven't actually played this before, and I thought it sounded kinda random when I saw it was on the Wii's Virtual Console. But the more I looked into it, the more I actually wanted to try it out for myself. And since the game got a lot of good reviews and everybody seemed to like it, then, you know, why not? Frig it! Number 19. Mischiefmakers. Alright, I'm pretty sure you recognize the pattern by now, but basically, any game that wasn't in 3 dimensions on the 64 pretty much got ignored. And I think that's a real shame for a game like Mischiefmakers, because I've always thought this game was pretty underrated. It doesn't offer 2D platforming a whole lot of new ideas or anything like that, but it still holds up well nonetheless. Plus, it's got a really cool and charming graphical style as well. I don't know how they'd have to go about getting the rights to this game since the developers haven't made anything new since 2014. But I mean, they do still exist and they've been re-releasing a lot of older games, so who knows? Maybe they'd want to make some extra money with the Switch's online service. Number 20. Snowboard Kids. Atlus has been making great games for years, but for some reason, people only noticed this recently. I mean, to be honest, even I didn't know what Snowboard Kids was until my good friend Shane told me about it. But sadly, I broke the thumbstick off his 64 controller within a minute of playing it. He got so mad that he puked his pants. And after playing it for a little while, I have no idea why more people don't talk about this game. These are some really fun, unique, and cute racing games for the 64 that still hold up very well to this very day. And given that it's a multiplayer game, I think it'd fit perfectly in the Switch's online service. But anyway, that's my lineup. I know I left a lot of key games out, but this video is not about the 20 best 64 games of all time. It's about the 20 best available games to put in the first wave of the Switch's online service. All the games made by Rare Studios are already in the Rare Replay compilation, so much like Mega Man and Castlevania, I really don't expect any of those games to end up here at any point in the future. It's probably a little more complicated to license with the Netflix model. If anything, I think it's more likely Rare Replay would come to the Switch. Plus, like I said, it's good to keep some games in the chamber anyway so they have a bigger spotlight when they finally do arrive. I mean, I think that's probably why we haven't seen Earthbound yet. But anyway, what'd you think of my selection though? Do you think this is how Nintendo's gonna kick things off? Do you even think the 64's coming at all? Or would you have done things differently even with the restrictions in mind? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below and I'll try my goddamnedest to respond to everybody. But let me tell you two people who should absolutely be 64 games chosen for the Switch's online service are today's patrons of the day, Red Jar and Aaron Ayala. If you want to be badasses like these two, then consider supporting FU Game Crew on Patreon for loot boxes in the mail and other wacky rewards. And if you want to make a cameo, then send pictures or videos of you rocking any FU Game Crew merch like these legendary human beings you see before you. As always, like and share this video anywhere on the internet to help this channel grow. And if you want to prove that you're not down with registered sex offenders, then go ahead and press the subscribe button if you haven't already. My name's CameronAllOneWord, and I'll be back with more videos soon.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.